Sometimes I just like to sit and listen to the sounds. The crickets, the birds. Sometimes I just listen to the stillness. I'm hoping that the world of nature will open up to you and show you some of her secrets. When we wander along the San Pedro River among the trees, or in washes like this, we begin to notice things. If we slow down just enough, we can hear and see things that we never saw before. Nature takes us into her world. When we have the patience to be present for this slow kind of unfolding, we start to collect experiences and little pieces of knowledge that together give us a sense of place. The passion flowers are principally a tropical group or genus found in many parts of the world. The flowers, usually large and often brightly colored, all have the same basic intricate structure as our Mexican passion flower. Our southwestern desert plants have evolved from tropical ancestors of an ancient tropical deciduous forest, surviving through strategies that allowed them to endure heat, dryness, and the stronger sunlight of the open desert. The Sinaloan milkweed vine is just on the edge of its comfortable habitat here in Arizona. It creeps up across the border, but is happiest much further south in Mexico, where it's a robust, large, tropical vine. This plant is called Tomba Vaquero in Mexico, which means cowboy falls down. I think these long, viney plants that grew along the rivers there maybe tangled up the horse's feet. What do you think? The desert gourds are closely related to squashes and melons, but are very much too bitter and laxative for human consumption, though relished by coyotes, coatimundi, and other wildlife. Seeds, however, can be washed and roasted and taste not bad. Sometimes I think it's the seeds the animals are going for. These vining plants have large tubers. The buffalo gourd particularly can have a very huge tuber, which allows it to send its long runner arms out often as far as 15 feet or more. This is the wild peppery bean that native peoples planted because it was so drought tolerant. It didn't need much rain. It produced lots of flowers and seeds and gave them something to eat. In Mexico, the amaranth plant is called bledo or quelites, which means greens. If it's picked before developing its long flowering seed tops, it can be cooked and tastes a lot like spinach, only quite a bit better in some people's opinions. The tiny seeds were popped or roasted and ground by native peoples. This wild tobacco looks very much like the commercial tobacco from which cigarettes are made, but it's much smaller, doesn't have the same huge leaves. Native peoples consider tobacco a sacred plant. They picked the leaves and cured them to smoke in their pipes. But smoking to these people had a very special meaning. It was done for ceremony, to mark specialness or sacredness of an event or time, to help people feel that they were a part of nature, with sky above and earth below, that the animals were their friends and the plants their helpers. Tobacco reminded people of their place in the beautiful web of life. Some people confuse caltrop with the Arizona poppy. The poppy blooms in the spring and this caltrop in the summer. This plant is related to the creosote bush and not to the poppy. Now, if you take a leaf of this plant and you rub it between your fingers and smell it, it has a wonderful, spicy, minty smell to it. A lot of people call this the nightmare plant. So if you have a nightmare, you go out and pick some of this plant and put it under your pillow. It seems to work. This next group of plants grow in the rocky outcrops of the Charleston Hills. Many of these plants have learned to carry their water with them in their big water-holding roots, up into these hills, away from the river. The Rouge Plant, with its fresh green and pink coloring, doesn't have the appearance of a desert plant. This is the sweet 4 o'clock. 4 o'clocks are called this because many open in the late afternoon, often staying open all night. We have several 4 o'clocks here, but this is the one that is the tallest and is distinguished by its very long, white, tubular flowers. This plant belongs to a group I call the big roots, which all have large water-holding tuberous roots, a strategy that allows them to endure desert drought and dry seasons. These plants die down to the ground in winter and become invisible. Their life force has been pulled back into the big root or tuber and held there, waiting till next season. Big root jatropha, or nettle spurge, is another plant whose large tuber allows it to survive through times of drought. Jatropha is in the Euphorbia or spurge family. These 3-lobed seed capsules are typical of this family, which includes many toxic plants as well as some medicines and a few foods. The root is not edible, rather unpleasantly laxative. The leaves might remind us of the poisonous castor bean of the same family. And yet this plant, with its gentle pink flowers, is a beautiful part of the desert landscape. Lamujer is a sister or very close relative of the jatropha and in the same family. You can see the similarity in the leaf shape. Lamujer, of course, means bad woman, and it is called this because it has long, sharp, stinging hairs all over the surface of the leaf. It is such an amazingly beautiful woman, and underneath her irritation, she can be quite sweet. Manihot is also a spurge and has the milky juice often found in the family. It is the northern relative of other tropical manihots, some of which are used to make rubber, and others which supply foods, such as cassava and tapioca. These last 3 plants are at home in southern Arizona's specialized desert habitat. They've slipped across the border and appear here, but do not extend much further north. Their home or birthplace is in Mexico. Saya is another plant in the desert that has a tuber which ensures its success through very hot, dry times. The Indians prized these tubers, which were apparently quite tasty and good to eat. The Tohono O'odham used them as a trade item. The flower of Saya is so large, very colorful, and interestingly asymmetrical. This plant is in the Portulaca family. It used to be called the jewels of Opar, but now they call it baby's breath. It is another big root, relying on its tuberous root to support lush growth. The very cool thing about this plant is that its succulent leaves, as well as those of other plants in the Portulaca family, are edible, pleasant, mild, slightly lemony. They taste great in salads. This is the orange flame flower, which is related to the pink baby's breath, and like it, has succulent, edible leaves. Alberstone traditionally has been considered a toothache plant. If you chew on any part of the plant, it's prickly and penetrating. It helps sore gums. It's also a lot like echinacea, can be used for different kinds of internal inflammation. We have many sennas in this area, but this particular senna has very large flowers and lovely long leaves. It also has quite long seed pods. It's easy to pick them and gather the seeds to sprinkle or to plant on your land. These wild zinnias are the relatives of our garden zinnias. These plants are little bushy perennials. The datura, sacred datura, is a magic but highly poisonous flower. It opens at night. I've seen sphinx moths dive bombing into it in the evening. This plant is related to the tobacco plant. The devil's claw seed pods, these long, devilish, twisty things, are used by the Tohono O'odham in making their baskets. The San Pedro matchweed fills up a lot of the bottomlands with its deep golden color very late in the summer. The weedy and beautiful Verbesina is a simple medicine for inflammation. It helps when it hurts. You can rub it on your skin for bites, stings, and sores. The robust and beautiful Sacaton fills many acres of bottomland. prickly poppy is a true poppy. Its very bitter yellow sap is a pain-killing sedative. This lovely plant often blooms from early in the spring through the summer and into the fall. The sotol is called desert spoon because if you pull a leaf off, the base of it has the appearance of a spoon. Agave is called the century plant because it lives many years before it blooms. After blooming, it dies. This process takes more like 10 to 15 years, sometimes less, and not a century. The cabbage-like cores, or heads, of the plant were a major food source for native peoples, especially the Apache. They stripped off the leaves and baked these heads for as long as 2 or sometimes nearly 3 days in rock-lined roasting pits. Roasted heads could also make a fermented drink, and, in more modern times, have been used for the production of tequila and mezcal, often done in Mexico on a very small scale with a crude or simple distilling apparatus like the one we see here. The Oca Tio is perhaps the most distinctive and spectacular image that we have in our territory, with its spiny, bare arms pointing to the sky, the red flame flowers shooting out the ends of these branches. But when it rains, we see forests of green where it was only bare before. The Fishhook Barrel is a strong presence in the desert. It is intricately oriented to the inclination of the hillside on which it grows and to the position of the sun. Here is the queen of the night. We call her La Reina, or Nightbloomingcereus. This last name is applied to many species with white nocturnal flowers. But this is the one at home in our territory. One of the few with a large tuber, another big root. The one called pain in the heart by the Apaches who used it as heart medicine. Each flower lasts just one night, opening with the coming of darkness and closing soon after sunrise. The seeds are spread by birds who enjoy the sweet, juicy fruits. The Nightbloomingcereus is just one of many night-blooming flowers. Sacred datura, canyon evening primrose, pale evening primrose, Christmas Joya, soap tree yucca, in dry times, the Nipple Cactus can be absolutely flat with the surface of the ground, but with rain it will stand up as a short little barrel. This particular Nipple Cactus has white milky juice, which is very unusual for a cactus. All parts of the prickly pear cactus are considered an excellent medicine for diabetes. Traditionally, and even now, people love to eat them. The pads, the young pads are eaten, and also the fruits make a wonderful juice. The cholla is our rose of the desert with its beautiful magenta flowers. Grilled over an open fire, cholla fruits taste a lot like fried green tomatoes. The Pima and Tohono O'odham, even today, gather the cholla flower buds earlier in the summer and prize them as a special and delicious traditional food. The fairy duster is related to the mimosas. It has inconspicuous petals, and what we see are long, quivering, sensitive stamens that make this puff. The flowers of snakeweed have a subtle, sweet, lemony smell when in full bloom. Sometimes you have to stick your face almost into the plant to get this delicate scent. On my property here, I like to gather bundles of this snakeweed. Traditionally, it's been used by Mexican Americans to make a soothing wash or bath for arthritic pain or just to relax. Tarbush is one of the primary signature plants of the Chihuahuan Desert. During the rainy season, the leaves become a brilliant emerald green. These leaves are peppery in taste and are used in Mexico as a tea for indigestion. Rabbit brush comes alive in the arroyos as a gray and yellow accent, fluttering with butterflies and insects that are drawn here to one of the last plants to provide a feast of nectar before winter. This is an ancient plant related to the pines. It has no leaves, but just dry, brittle sticks. This plant is called Oca Tio in Mexico, and we often call it Mormon tea here because the Mormon settlers used it as a tea substitute. It has quite a similar taste to black tea and a pleasant taste, but it's necessary to simmer the twigs for quite a while to get the flavor. This dense, almost black-looking shrub from a distance has very, very tiny leaves and tiny fruits. If you taste these fruits, they actually taste fairly good and are relished by all kinds of birds, rodents, and other animals. Leaves of the creosote bush are coated with a resin that protects them against evaporation in the desert heat. This resin is responsible for the special smell of the desert when it rains. All native peoples of the desert have loved and revered creosote, using it for medicine and magic, and burning it as a cleansing smudge or smoke in places where there is no sage or juniper. The Fern Akasha is a kind of sensitive plant. It closes its leaves up very tightly at certain times, especially during the night. Other times they're wide open. What distinguishes the white thorn from other similar-looking trees and shrubs in the desert are its long, white, slender thorns, its sometimes pink, reddish, or purplish bark, its leaflets that are so much smaller than the mesquite, which has some more robust white thorns. and, of course, its little balls of bright yellow flowers, which can fill the desert for miles with a sweet scent. The desert sumacs are often called lemonade berry. The berries can be eaten, or a handful put into a glass of water makes a very refreshing drink. Desert willow probably has the most beautifully feminine blossoms of any flower in the desert. In Mexico, people will take a staff of desert willow made out of a desert willow branch when traveling in order to protect them from dangers and to make them feel more comfortable in unfamiliar places. The first time I ever decided to spend some time actually sitting with a desert willow tree was in a very, very hot June. No rain for a long time. At that hottest time of year, the desert willow was in full flower with its very frilly, feminine, light pink flowers. As I went and sat under the tree, everything changed for me. I call it the rain tree because little drops of cool liquid sprinkled over my body. I think it was probably nectar falling out of the flowers. Not only did it cool me off physically, cooled off my body, but it changed my perception a lot. As I sat under that tree and looked out at everything, my vision shifted. Things looked beautiful. The desert, its shapes, its colors, its thorns and everything, the rocks and the washes looked so beautiful. And I realized that the desert willow had done that for me, that somehow it had changed how I see things. Getting close to the walnut tree, you can smell its distinctive spicy smell. These leaves, which can be used as tea, and the green hulls also make a very dark black stain. Okay, these are mesquite beans. And for the Indians who lived in this territory, who didn't have stores, who didn't have bread or wheat, this was one of their staple and most important foods. Right now, they're green. They're not ripe yet. But when they get yellowish and reddish, they're very, very sweet and delicious. You can take them and dry them, grind them up and make flour. And with that flour, you can make pancakes or breads or all kinds of foods. This was a very, very important thing that kept people alive. Also, animals, javelinas and deer and all kinds of animals love these mesquite beans. Okay, this is the western honey mesquite. You can see that the leaves are a lot longer and there's a lot more space between each of the leaves than in the other velvet mesquite that we've seen before. The hackberry is a very special tree in the desert. It prefers the washes and places of greater water, but can also grow in the drier spots. The berries, though hard and small, are tasty to people and wildlife. This is the western soapberry, and it makes little round berries that are kind of poisonous. You don't want to eat them, but the settlers use them to make soap. The seep willow, as well as many other species of baccharis, have been used by native peoples as medicine. particularly as external disinfectants. When you wander among the plants this way, when you really spend time with them, you might notice when you go home or back to town that now you seem to see things in a different way.